January, in the year of 1948. The beloved three-letter agency known as the CIA had a disturbing thought. Is it possible to create a real-life Manchurian candidate? Someone to carry out our bidding with no questions asked and no regard for their own personal safety. Quote, can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and against fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation? What would follow that question would go on to be the first and one of the most disturbing, abhorrent, and secretive CIA experiments ever conducted in regards to mind control, hypnosis, sleeper agent activation, sensory deprivation, and injections of mysterious substances. An experiment that would fly under the radar of the public for decades, and one that would include things such as forced addiction and withdrawals to drugs such as morphine and LSD and cocaine, forced amnesia in unknowing participants, and also the forced injection of viruses and fungal infections, such as the dengue fever. All of this perpetuated as some sort of thought control and interrogation tactic experiment. And now that we have the majority of the documents of this experiment, I think it's time we dive into the many horrors that lie within it. This is Project Artichoke, the CIA mind control experiment that you've never heard of. So everything that I just explained to you in the intro is information from Project Artichoke, which sadly is the very first in a long line of CIA mind control experiments that have happened in the past 150 years. I think I'm going to make this a series on the channel where I go over the CIA experiments with mind control and the military and everything on our own people. I know it's sad that there's enough instances that I can make a series out of it, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. But this video's topic, Project Artichoke, is the precursor to all the famous ones, MKUltra and the rest. So my goal is to shed light on everything that happened there and kind of just put it to the forefront. That is, if YouTube doesn't demonetize it, like the last video was. Thanks for that, guys. Thanks for that so much. But if you did see the oil video, I appreciate you watching. That was an awesome video to make. I pray that YouTube doesn't demonetize this one too. If they do, they're just vindicating me. But the way I want to structure this video is through a timeline of events. That way you get the entire story and all the information surrounding it in the most digestible way possible. And to do that, we have to take it all the way back to the beginning. In 1948, the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence had an idea that they wanted to test. Their goal was to determine if they could make one person or multiple people complete an act, such as assassination or espionage, without their own internal humanism stopping them from doing so. Essentially, they wanted to create a sleeper agent, super soldier, drone type person that'll do anything on command. Think of Plankton and the chum bucket head people. And they wanted to do these experiments under the guise of these things just being interrogation tactics they wanted to try. They literally were telling people and other military officials that these were just some brand spanking new interrogation tactics to get the truth from POIs and stuff, and POWs. But obviously that's a lie. At its genesis, and before its current name, Project Artichoke, the study was actually known as Project Bluebird. And this Project Bluebird, or Artichoke, they're interchangeable, these were experiments that took place on American soil as well as on foreign soil. Of course, just like with any experiment, you have to decide what you're going to be experimenting on and how you're going to obtain those people or things. And let's just say that the CIA doesn't necessarily have the best track record with picking willing participants for their experiments. So from 1949 to 1950, they began looking for individuals in the following categories: potential intelligence agents, defectors, refugees, and prisoners of war. Also, in the leaked documents, it says that they were also looking for others, which, what does that even mean? What are you telling me? So 1949, 1950, the plans and the structure of the experiments is kind of getting set into motion, and the subjects of the experiments are being chosen. And with all that out of the way, the experiments were set to begin, and many, many untold horrors were about to commence. late 1950. So in this early stage of trying to find a sleeper agent, a super soldier, a Manchurian candidate that would commit assassinations and survive interrogation tactics, the CIA would take the prisoners of war, the spies that they thought were spies, and everybody that I just mentioned, and they would inject psychoactive drugs into these people. These drugs consisted of, but weren't limited to, cocaine, LSD, ketamine, marijuana, and literally an entire slew of things I probably can't even talk about on here, quite frankly. While these patients, or while these lab rats, you could say, were being injected with these psychoactive drugs, they were also undergoing heavy hypnosis effects. Pretty much the scientists were melting the brains and the memory receptacles of the people that were going to experience the experiments. That way they wouldn't remember everything that happened to them. Yay. The following quote from the actual CIA document about Project Bluebird and Artichoke, this document lays out all of the goals of the experiment. I'm just going to read them to you because they sound insane and they are insane, and you just got to hear it how they wrote it. Set out below are specific problems which can only be resolved by experiment, testing, and research as proposed in the paragraphs above. These are not in any sense all of the problems, but are merely typical and point up the need for practical research. Number 1. Can we condition by post-to suggestion agency employees or persons of interest in this agency to prevent them from giving information to unauthorized sources or for committing any act on behalf of a foreign or domestic enemy? Number 2. Can we, in a matter of an hour, 2 hours, 1 day, etc., induce a condition in an unwilling subject to such an extent that he will perform an act for our benefit, long range? Number 3. Can we create, by post-to control, an action contrary to the individual's basic moral principles? Number 4. Can we seize a subject and, in the space of an hour or two, by post-control, have him crash an airplane, wreck a train, etc.? Short, immediate activity. Number 5. Can we, by S1 and 2 techniques, force a subject, unwilling or otherwise, to travel long distances, commit specific acts, and return to us, or bring documents or materials? And can a person acting under post-to control successfully travel long distance? Number 6. Can we use S1 and 2 to combat fatigue? Number 7. Can we guarantee total amnesia under any and all conditions? Number 8. Can we alter a person's personality? And how long will it hold? Number 9. Can we design tests to determine whether or not an enemy agent has been conditioned by S1 and 2 and any other method? Number 10. Can we detect S1 and 2 by use of S1 and 2? Number 11. Can we make a conditioned subject reveal by S1 and 2 specifically how they were conditioned? Drugs, torture, fatigue, hostage pressure techniques. Number 12. Can we devise a system for making unwilling subjects into willing agents, and then transfer that control to untrained agency agents in the field by use of codes or identifying signs or credentials? That's sleeper agent stuff. Number 13. How long can we sustain a post-suggestion unaided with reinforcement? Number 14. What would be the fastest way to induce S1 and conditions with drugs or without any mechanical aids? Number 15. Can we devise a standard, simple, relatively fast technique for inducing S1 and 2 conditions that can only be used by untrained agents? Number 16. Is it possible to find agents that can be used to gain S1 control from a gas pencil, odorless, colorless, one-shot, etc.? Number 17. What are full details on sleep-inducing machines? And finally, number 21. Can we, while a subject is under S1 in control, show them a map and have them point out specific items, locations, etc. on the map? Can we also have them make detailed drawings, sketches, and plans? So that entire list, that crazy stuff they're saying, that is what the scientists in the CIA wanted to determine. And you can really tell by the list, they wanted to see if they could create a super soldier that they could turn off and on with a flick. A snap, I mean. That's not a flick. That's a flick. Ironically, and kind of funnily, and like a morbid twist, the CIA actually had a hard time finding a doctor who would carry out these experiments. Gee, I wonder why. In the document, they literally discuss how hard it was to sift through different doctors because most weren't willing, most weren't available, and most were not caught up to date on mind control or hypnosis. They did eventually find their main doctor, and the experiments were officially underway. All of the information I just told you from the beginning to now was presented to the head of the CIA for approval, to Roscoe Hilonketeter, who was the then CIA director. Of course, within a few minutes, he approved the experiments to go forward, and instead of siphoning funds the legal way on the public books, they used something called unaccountable funds, which is like the black budget. But they did this so they wouldn't get tracked down or catch any heat for torturing and maiming people with drugs and sickness. 3 months after the project was greenlit, a team of 3 interrogators traveled to Japan to begin the experimentation. They wanted to test out the behavioral techniques that I mentioned earlier, as well as try to tick off a few things on the list that I just read. The reason they went to Japan was because they wanted to use prisoners of war or expected spies or double agents. That way they could extract useful information from them. This was also during the CIA's obsession with developing a truth serum, so that was also used heavily in these experiments. I actually got to Japan less than a month after the Korean War had started, which made it the perfect time to test out these theories, these experiments, these tortures. When these 3 interrogators arrived in Japan to begin these experiments, they got past the military that we had over there and the Japanese military by saying that they were going to test out new interrogation methods, and that their goal was to carry out, quote, intensive polygraph work. For their first batch of test subjects, they fused together a concoction of a few different things. They mixed sodium amytal and benzodrine together to form what they called a truth serum to inject into these prisoners of war. However, that is all we know of the experiments in Japan, and from what the CIA listed and documented, they were deemed a success. Although by what metric they were deemed a success, we don't know.
We'll return after these messages.
And before I get back to the depravity of the CIA and its experiments, a quick word from our sponsor today, Factor. Now, I have worked with Factor before, and I was actually extremely excited to get this opportunity to do so again, because Factor makes it super easy for you to meet your nutritional goals by delivering fresh and never frozen dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. It's that easy. While researching videos like this one, my mind and brain turns to goop and starts to drip out of my ears, so it's awesome that I don't have to worry about making dinner after I do so. And that's why I love Factor, because it takes away the stress of grocery shopping and meal prepping and cleanup and cooking. Plus, there's over 35 different meals that you can pick each week, which gives you a nice range of options, including keto and calorie smart and veggie options and such. On top of that, it only takes 2 minutes to prepare a Factor meal. And now Factor even offers these cool snack options, like breakfasts and smoothies and juices and things like that. So if you want to experience these amazing meals getting sent right to your door, head to factor75.com or click the top link below and use code SPOOGLY50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. Again, that is code SPOOGLY50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box of meals, plus 20% off your next month of orders. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching. Now that these first initial experiments of truth serum and hypnosis and amnesia and stuff was conducted, the CIA had another idea. How could they use this technology, use these drugs in a sort of offensive way and not a defensive way? They just tried them out on captured prisoners. Well, how could they do what I read from the letter? How could they make sleeper agents to carry out actions from across the sea, from anywhere in the world? How could they do that? Using this slew of drugs and hypnosis and shock therapy and God knows what else, could they create the Manchurian Candidate? Could they make the Bucky from Marvel? Fast forward to the end of the year of 1951, and the Japanese experiments that I was just talking about were now being conducted in Germany. The same style of experiments. They were taking place at a location known as Camp King, which in and of itself is a very famous prison, but it's over near Frankfurt in Germany. Camp King was chosen for these experiments because it was off-site, it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and nothing there got really reported. But most importantly for the CIA, the inhabitants of this prison were Soviet spies who would make perfect test subjects for their torture. These Soviet prisoners, these suspected spies, even if they weren't actually, they would then go on to experience horrible, horrible conditions and things that happened to them. More electric shock, more chemical concoctions, more drugs, more forced sleep deprivation, and things of that nature. All with the hopes of testing these experiments, testing the theories that I read to you, and trying to create the ultimate sleeper agent, the ultimate mind-controlled person. So after the interrogation experiments in Japan and Germany had gone on, had conducted themselves, the project halted for several months during the spring and summer, the middle part of 1951, and nothing was heard about it, nothing was documented, nothing was produced until August later that year. And on that day of August 20th, 1951, the project was renamed from Project Bluebird to the title of today's video, Project Artichoke. And now that it was renamed Project Artichoke, it would undergo a more at-home basis, essentially pulling some funding from the German and the Japanese experiments back to our home base, which is American soil, and experimenting on our own people. It's one thing to experiment on, prisoners of war and suspected spies and double agents, but it's another thing to bring these experiments back home to your own people. This is kind of crossing a boundary. And at this point in the Project Artichoke and Bluebird history is when the events that I mentioned at the very beginning and early on in the video start to take place. The CIA would begin to find people in the USA that they deemed to be enemies of the state, or double agents. And they started up these experiments again, like in Germany and Japan, but this time it was amped up. There was hypnosis, there was morphine injections like the other experiments, but now cocaine and heroin and peyote and LSD and mescaline and all these types of hard substances and hard mind-altering chemicals were being pumped into these people at the same time as the hypnosis and other things. And the golden goose of these experiments ended up being, of course, LSD. They found that LSD created the most likable results. Something about the LSD was able to turn these individuals into malleable and impressionable people. The sad part of it is the individuals who were in this experiment, they probably don't even remember it happened to them because they were under so much forced amnesia. All they have is vague, spotty memories of it. And that'll happen when you get injected with this harmful concoction of ingredients. I'm sure it's very dehumanizing to have to feel like that. Now, just because the project had changed its name and there was like a few months break in the summer of 1951 and forces were kind of being pulled back from Germany and Japan, that doesn't mean the project was dying down. In fact, it means the exact opposite. Because now the CIA was seeing these results with the LSD. They were almost being able to control these people to a point of them being like puppets and the Manchurian Candidate and stuff. It was getting closer. So they started to amp up the doses, the injection rate, and things of that nature. They also came up with a new concoction of injections to put inside of these people. A new combination of something called sodium pentothal and hypnosis together were tried on subjects. I just want to mention that sodium pentothal is quite literally the agent in the lethal injection that numbs you completely. It takes your entire life force away almost. And it's in fact been banned for 20 years for how harmful and how potent it is. So you can kind of see the levels the CIA was stooping to during this time of the experimentation. They were sedating these people with literally pretty much the lethal injection to the point where they were so close to not being alive. And then they were also pumping these drugs, LSD and peyote and stuff inside of them while they were in that state of almost not being alive. That is the experimentation that they wanted to complete. And in their mind, this was the most successful way to create mindless drones that would in fact listen to them, and the public was none the wiser. Experimentation like I just described with these newfound ways and methods continued until mid-1952. Injections, hypnosis, amnesia, repeat over and over and over and over again in different people. The CIA was essentially playing God at this point. Moving on to the next year, 1952, the responsibility and management of Project Artichoke was actually changed. It was transferred from the Office of Scientific Intelligence and moved over to the Office of Inspection and Security, which is just like another branch of the CIA. So it's not like it's not moving from the CIA to somewhere else. the CIA is just moving itself around inside of it, just bureaucratic nonsense. But since the shift like that happened inside, there was a slight change of direction in the experiments. The project would now almost solely be focused on hypnosis, truth serums, and the goal of developing that sleeper agent. It's literally just now the hard drugs, the morphine, the sodium pentothal. It was just that over and over and over again. And at this point in the entire timeline of events is where we get that quote I read at the very beginning. And we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation. And it is at this point when they went just full on crazy mode trying to attain that. And who better to test out these experiments on than your own CIA agents? That's right. Even if you work for these people that do these horrible things, you still are not safe from it. Later in 1952, LSD was increasingly given to unsuspecting and unknowing agents in the CIA. Their goal, allegedly, was to determine the effects that LSD would have on people that didn't know they were taking it. And all of this was kept hidden from the agents, from the entire agency, and no one knew. Keep in mind that this all began as Project Bluebird 2.5 years before this, and they were experimenting on prisoners of war and turncoats and that kind of thing. And now they're experimenting on their own agents. That's how far they went in 2.5 years. Just putting that out there. One of the agents was reportedly under the effects of LSD for 77 days. Moving forward to the next year, in the fall of 1953, which is a full 4 years after the experimentation began, the information and documentation of Project Artichoke pretty much comes to a screeching halt. There's almost nothing new being published, almost nothing new being documented, and that's where everything ends. Now, the CIA claims that the project ended in 1956, the 3 years after the date I just said. And they claim that they ended the project because of lack of funding and just general lack of interest. But several other people disagree with that claim because of other things that were happening at the same time. One theory comes from a reported memo that was sent to the new CIA director, which name is Alan Welsh Dulles, where it was alleged that Project Artichoke actually turned into MK Ultra. Just like how Bluebird turned into Artichoke, this memo that apparently came out said that Artichoke had then turned into MK Ultra, which is the famous experiments, electroshock hypnosis that you all have probably heard of. We can't be sure of this, but I would not doubt it in the slightest. But beyond the suspected memo and the CIA stating that the project ended in 1956, there's almost no more information. The trail runs cold. That's it. Unless it became MK Ultra, then we obviously have tons of stuff about that. MK Ultra did begin in 1953, which is the same year that the information stopped coming out about Artichoke. Who knows? But then again, it doesn't even matter because it's still happening. MK Ultra still happened as well, so whatever. Project Artichoke was the beginning of a decades-long infatuation that the CIA had with subjecting people to heinous methods of experimentation under the guise of making new interrogation tactics and new amnesia tactics and everything like that. And they always claimed that it was for the common good of warfare and espionage. Now, Artichoke is constantly overshadowed by the more popular MK Ultra, but none of those would have existed if it wasn't for Project Bluebird and Artichoke, which is the same thing, obviously. But Artichoke began it all, for better and for worse. For worse and for worse. And if it wasn't for Project Bluebird being born in 1948, none of these horrible things would have happened the way they did. That probably still would have happened because the CIA is awesome and cool. Who knows? It began with experimenting on prisoners of war and suspected traitors, try to get them to confess to their crimes. And it ended with the CIA experimenting on their own people, on their own soil, and injecting them with lethal levels of the exact same component that's in the lethal injection. And then putting them under hypnosis and then putting LSD inside of them. The links they go to. The worst part of it all is these experiments literally were for nothing. Like, we didn't get the super soldier. We did not get the sleeper agent that we wanted. We didn't get this person that'll blindly follow orders and defuse bombs and go crazy in combat. It didn't happen. And it didn't exist. And even if it has, we haven't been told about it. But then again, they also don't tell us about anything. But yet again, this means another 3-letter agency committed atrocities against its own people who didn't deserve it in the slightest. And even the other people, like in Germany and Japan, that were subjected to these awful things, they didn't deserve it either. Something about the three-letter agencies. Now, Artichoke was swept under the rug until the 1970s, and even now, like I said, people still don't know what you're talking about if you mention Bluebird or Artichoke, and especially the ramifications that they had with all the other experiments that came out after them. So that is why I made this video today, with the goal of showing you and kind of shining light to the best I can on how this all began. Everybody knows about, like I said, MK Ultra for the 15th time, but no one knows how it all started. I also wanted to show you that this stuff was happening back in the 1940s. People think it's, you know, a 60s, 70s, late 50s thing. No, this was the 40s. It's been happening since then, and it's probably going to continue to happen just under our noses. And I want to leave you with this final thought. If the CIA was willing to drop LSD on their own constituents, their own employees, for 77 days, that's a few months. Imagine what they could and would do to people like you and me. Just something to think about. Thank you for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, it's probably undoubtedly going to get demonetized, but I hope you do enjoy it still. Leave a like, comment, something to try to boost it as much as you can. I really hope it doesn't get demonetized. 2 in a row would suck. But I love making videos like this. I just really enjoy it, and I hope that you enjoyed watching it as well. Let me know if you like the face cam style of this video also. I've been told that I should do this, so I'm gonna try it. I've done it in some other videos that you've probably seen, but that's random. You don't really care about it. Anyways, drop a like for my sanity. Hopefully this video doesn't flop. Big Oil's already after me, and now the CIA is coming after me. What other agencies should I get on their bad side next, guys? Leave a comment telling me. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully. Have a great day. Bye-bye.